Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. As all members have received a copy of the call of tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the winter meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM Moderator. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our December meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. We do have one change in those minutes on page 2. In the second paragraph, beginning Joan E. Caldwell, Chairman of District 10, made a motion. After the word motion, we need to insert a comma, which was duly seconded, comma, and take out on behalf of the district. That motion was made in her individual capacity. So it will now read, made a motion, which was duly seconded, to replace the last paragraph, etc. Are there any other suggested changes to our minutes of the December meeting? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as amended stand adopted upon unanimous consent. All right. I don't believe we have any preliminaries tonight. I notified all district and committee chairs that based upon the reports that we received, I was recommending that we put all but 3 items on the consent calendar. The items that will be considered separately are items 1, 5, and 11. And so at this point, I will now put the following items on our consent calendar. And assuming they stay on that calendar, what I am about to say is all that will be heard tonight on those, as we don't get committee reports or have discussion on consent calendar items. So the first item that I am designating as a consent item is item number 2. That is a resolution to appoint Howard P. Sorrell, Jr. to be a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring March 31, 2014. Next is item 3, a resolution to appoint Catherine Brennan as a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring March 31, 2014. Item 4, a resolution appointing Gloria Jackson to be a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring March 31, 2014. Item 6, resolution appointing Christopher A. Thurlow to be a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term expiring March 31, 2014. Item 7, a resolution appointing Thomas Siccardi to be a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term expiring March 31, 2014. Item 8, a resolution appointing Stephen Gross to be a member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring March 31, 2014. Item 9 is a resolution appointing Phyllis Sheridan to be a member of the Historic District Commission for a term expiring March 31, 2016. Item 10, a resolution appointing Leslie Klein to be an alternate member of the Historic District Commission for a term expiring March 31, 2016. All of those appointments are as they appear in the call, and they are all reappointments, no new candidates. These people have all held positions prior. The next consent item is item 12. This is a resolution authorizing the first selectman to apply for grants from the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund, apply for, accept, and after approval by the BET, spend grants from the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund. And the last of the consent items is a resolution appropriating the sum of $68,750 to the 2 listed programs in the resolution. One, the amount of $57,450, is going to the St. Luke's LifeWorks boiler replacement project at Franklin Commons, and the sum of $11,300 is going to St. Luke's LifeWorks roof replacement project at 20 Woodland Place property. These funds coming as part of the 2010 Community Development Block Grant Program. So those 10 items have now been placed on the consent calendar. Is there any objection to the designation of any of those items as consent items? Hearing none, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Consent items 2, 3, 4, 6 through 10, 12, and 13. And please proceed to poll your delegation. At this point, I will turn the chair over to our moderator pro tem, Joan Caldwell.
Item number 1 is now before us. May I have the resolution with regard to item 1, please? Mr. Curtis, District 9.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Item 1 is, as appears on the call, it is a resolution to change wording in the rule concerning the creation of special committees to have those committees approved by the RTM. And I so move.
Is there a second? The resolution has been made and seconded to change the rules so that special committees are appointed by the representative town meeting. May we have the reports of the committees which considered this, and it happens to be all the committees, so I guess we'll start. Well, I see Mr. Brady there from Education Committee. Let's start with you.
Good evening. Bob Brady, Chairman of the Education Committee. The Education Committee met last Monday night, January 10th, together with the Finance, Land Use, Legislative and Rules, and Public Works Committees to hear presentations and questions on Item 1 and on Item 11. All districts were represented. Paul Curtis presented Item 1, an amendment to our rules which would require the RTM's approval for the moderator to appoint special committees. Under the proposed rule, all special committees would in effect be appointed by the RTM as a whole. Mr. Curtis explained that the principal reason underlying this proposal is to assure that all committee appointments are memorialized in the RTM's minutes. The amendment would only apply to the moderator. It would not apply, or it would not prevent committee or district chairman from appointing special committees. Mr. Byrne addressed the meeting, noting that 5 special committees he appointed were each documented in the minutes. Their reports were presented, discussed, and some parts adopted, others rejected. He noted that several of these committees served for extended periods of time and required special expertise, and was in part a justification for using special committees rather than the individual standing committees. Following the discussion, the Q&A, the Education Committee adjourned to the Hayton Room to discuss the item. The Education Committee believed this change is unnecessary as the present system appears to work fine. The committee voted 0 in favor, 12 opposed, with no abstentions. Thank you.
Ms. Vasiliotis for the Health and Human Services Committee.
The Health and Human Services Committee met in a joint session with the Parks and Recreation Committee and Transportation Committee on no, it wasn't January. Was it January 11th? Yeah, it was January 11th. In the Cone Meeting Room, in Town Hall. The meeting was called to order by Vince DeMarco, District 9, and Chair of the Transportation Committee at 7:30. As Paul Curtis again presented Item 1, which is a rule change that's offered by 20 qualified voters of the town of Greenwich. Mr. Curtis explained that this rule change is mostly up for discussion. It is being presented because while the results of a special committee end up in the RTM minutes, how the special committee started or who the members are not recorded in the minutes. This rule change would not apply to RTM standing committees or their subcommittees. The goal of the resolution is to have any special committee come before the RTM in the form of a resolution so that it is recorded in the minutes. The resolution is not designed to be the be-all and end-all, and Mr. Curtis also stated that if this resolution is not correct, then we should vote it down and bring it back later in a different form. Someone asked Mr. Curtis, if it ain't broke, why do we need to fix it? He was also asked what trend, event, circumstance, or other matters leads the proponents of this resolution to state that the current method of the moderator appointing a special committee needs to be changed. Mr. Curtis stated that there was nothing that he knew of, it simply was not done. Mr. Brady noted that the RTM was aware of the Nathaniel Witherell Special Committee, for example, when it was formed. Mr. Curtis again reiterated that he could not give a specific example, but that the formation of the committee and the members were not recorded in the RTM minutes when the special committee was formed. He then had to leave to attend the town services meeting and present to them. Mr. Byrne then spoke as to the reason he felt the proposed resolution should be voted down by the RTM. He stated that a special committee is formed under certain circumstances to deal with a unique situation, and the drafters of the rules gave the moderator the flexibility to deal with the situation as it arises. He also noted that every committee except the Claims Committee is an advisory committee. The committee makes a recommendation, and only a vote of the RTM represents the full view of the RTM. Mr. Burns believes the system works well. He also believes that this would prevent the moderator from impaneling a special committee should the need arise. He also thought he would have expected to hear a justification for this rule change, but none was given, even though this would be, in his opinion, a major rule change. He also would have expected that the proponents would have listed the special committees that were formed in past years, but this was also not done in the explanos. Mr. Burns, I'm sure, will be here to explain his views further, but he also explained that there are two general categories of situations where flexibility is required. First are specific issues requiring a substantial amount of time beyond which those on the standing committees could provide. And the second one is a special one-time project where the need for a special mix of talents is required. Since his appointment as the RTM moderator, Mr. Burns has formed 5 special committees. He cited the Nathaniel Witherell Committee, formed in 2003, when the BOC, Finance, and HHS Committee had taken the project on. They had held public meetings to receive input, but then, at the request of the then HHS chair, Bob Richardson, the moderator was asked to form a special committee to draw on construction, legal, and environmental expertise. The moderator identified those individuals who were willing and able to take on the project. The special committee was appointed in July 2003 and began work that summer. It is, according to Mr. Byrne, a sterling example of how a special committee can be done well. Mr. Byrne also reminded that special committees are not stealth committees. Everyone is aware of the committees. The committees post notices and agendas as they must under state law. He then spoke about the Special Committee on RTM organization. He said his intention to form the committee at an RTM, he also stated that he had told the RTM of his intent to form the committee at an RTM meeting. He knows that some people did not get on the committee, although they wanted to get on, but he appointed a group that, in his judgment, would bring back some fresh ideas. He further stressed that the committee is not doing the moderator's work, it is doing the RTM work. He also cited the 75th Anniversary Committee, led by Thespina Fassiliotis of District 11, and the special committee formed in 2005 looking at retirement benefits on the advice of the Finance Committee. He also noted that there may be sensitive issues to minimize the heat brought upon the RTM, and in 2002 there was a special committee on RTM decorum in response to public outcry that was building up regarding the manner that candidates were being appointed to the RTM. The moderator appointed a committee of 3 people to investigate the factual background. The committee recommended censure, but since there was no authority to do so, nothing official was done, and the situation was resolved. Finally, Mr. Byrne noted situations where he considered forming special committees but did not do so. One was to consider the residency status of a member, and the other was to look at the Hamilton Avenue School project. In the first instance, the situation regarding that member was resolved, and in the second instance, the pending litigation and the progress of the Glenville School overrode the formation of the special committee. He also noted that not all committees are not approved by the RTM. For example, subcommittees are not approved by the RTM. Committees are formed to do the legwork and to bring back their findings to the RTM so the RTM can then debate the issues and either accept any recommendations or vote them down. He ended by stating of the 5 moderator special committees that he mentioned, he asked the question, has the RTM been harmed or helped by these committees? If it is felt that the RTM is harmed, then you should vote for the regulation. If it is felt that these committees have helped the RTM, then give the moderator a hug and vote it down. The HHS committee then adjourned at 8:30 to the Evaristo room to consider the resolution. And excuse me, but this was a long meeting for us. I just have to get my notes. I'm sorry. Okay. We then again discussed the resolution. We were fortunate to have Betsy Furman, the chair of District 9, as an alternate that night to the Health and Human Services Committee. And she began the discussion by explaining that this resolution was not a District 9, and I want to stress that, was not a District 9 resolution. She also expressed her frustration with the negative spin that was being presented with respect to what occurred with District 9 and the special committees on rules, where both District 9 and District 4 asked to be on the special committee but was not appointed by the moderator. Ms. Furman stressed that this resolution was not a result of sour grapes on the part of District 9. Although District 9 was upset that District 9 and 4 presented items for consideration to the special committee on rules, that apparently was not discussed or brought up by the committee. This was not the reason for this resolution, which she would like to make clear for the record. Ms. Furman also noticed that District 9 had hired several parliamentarians to look over the RTM rules and discuss with District 9 what the RTM is doing right and what the RTM is doing wrong, in their view. The feeling is that the moderator's special committee is not an RTM committee. This resolution was merely to address the approval by the RTM by assuring that the committee appears in the call via resolution and that the approval is recorded in the minutes. The HHS committee felt that District 9 was to be commended for taking the initiative for meeting with the parliamentarians to review our rules. The members suggested that they perhaps present their findings of the parliamentarians to the RTM for discussion, either in the form of resolution or in other form, as to how or what may need to be looked at with respect to our rules. The committee then voted on the resolution. The vote was 3-6-0. The members from District 9 and 12 felt the goal of the resolution to have the special committee recorded in the minutes of the RTM is an important one, although the District 12 member felt there was a narrow focus by Mr. Curtis. The member from District 4 felt that since 20 other citizens signed on to the resolution, it was a worthy topic to consider.
Mr. Drake of the Budget Overview Committee.
The Budget Overview Committee discussed this item in our regular meeting on January 6th, and we viewed the resolution as simply ensuring that all committees acting on behalf of the RTM are approved by the RTM. The most common observation in our committee was that this item ensured a say for each RTM member, and that seemed democratic and non-controversial in our view. Our committee's vote was 8 in favor, none opposed, with districts 1, 2, 3, and 12 absent. Thank you.
Mrs. Sadiq Khan for the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening. As you've heard, Parks and Rec met in a joint session with Health and Human Services and Transportation. I'm not going to repeat the report because Karen did an excellent job of explaining what went on when these three committees had their meeting. When we adjourned to the conference room for our own meeting, we had a short discussion. The comments were that many people felt this was a waste of time, was not necessary to even be taking this up. Something isn't wrong, something isn't broken, there's no reason to change it. There were others who felt, those who abstained, saw the merits of both sides of the argument. So our vote was 0, 6, and 2. Districts 1, 2, 3, and 12 were absent.
Mr. Bergwager for the Legislative and Rules Committee.
The Legislative and Rules Committee attended the joint meeting on January 10. Previous speakers have given a very detailed account of the matters that were raised there. The only additional item that I would add is that when the moderator was commenting on this matter, he noted that the explanos state that committees act on behalf of the RTM, whereas the only committee that does is the Claims Committee. The Legislative and Rules Committee retired to the Evaristo Room at 8:31 and had a vigorous discussion on this matter. Some committee members pointed out that the moderator should not have unlimited executive powers. They were concerned that special committees appointed by the moderator may reflect the moderator's bias. They also noted that some committees had been appointed without representation from all districts. Other committee members pointed out that special committees other than the Claims Committee have no power except to report to the RTM. The RTM is the one that makes the decisions. They believe the moderator had not abused his powers, and in fact, I don't think any committee member believed that. The vote on legal order was 9-1-0, with District 1 voting no. The vote on the merits was 2-8-0, Districts 9 and 10 voting yes. Districts 2 and 3 were absent.
Mr. Ennis for the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Finance Committee met January 10th at 7:30 and then adjourned at 8 o'clock to meet with a joint session, which it concluded around 8:35 and returned to its lounge meeting room. My report is about 3 pages long. If you bear with me, I think I can cut it down to just the details you haven't heard already. The vote was 0-12-0. Thank you.
Mr. Gavee for the Public Works Committee.
Yes. The Public Works Committee met following the joint meeting separately, and District 1 felt that the motion was intended to restrict the moderator's activities despite the stated goal of properly recording the formation of moderator special committees in the RTM minutes. District 8 was concerned about the information in the explanatory comments regarding potential further changes in the RTM rules to address the composition and mission of moderator special committees. District 3 felt the motion would restrict the freedom of the moderator. The committee itself voted 1 in favor, 9 opposed, no abstentions, with districts 2 and 4 absent, and District 9 in favor. What was his reason again? Well, part of the reason was he had attended a previous discussion outside our committee and he had voted in favor for it, so he continued to vote in favor for it. So the vote was 1 in favor, 9 opposed.
Mr. Dillman for Town Services.
Good evening. Town Services held an open publicized meeting at Town Hall on Tuesday, the 11th of January, and Mr. Curtis was in attendance. Mr. Curtis stated that the intent of this item was to force transparency into the operations of the RTM. He stated that all committees should be made and appointed publicly so that any interested party has the ability to research their work. He cited a few examples of committees that were created and performed their duties on behalf of the RTM without ever being made public. He felt this is an injustice to both the RTM and the citizens of Greenwich. He further stated this is only one way to achieve transparency, but may not be the best way. The vote was 7-2, District 8 was absent. The 2 abstentions were one individual had voted on this in another committee and did not feel it appropriate to vote on the same item twice. And the second abstention was an original signer of the citizens' petition and felt it would be a conflict.
Mr. Berg for Land Use Committee.
Good evening, Ms. Moderator, members. So the Land Use Committee met jointly on the Monday night with the other committees, and then adjourned and met and took this up our vote on it was 5 in favor, 6 against. Those voting no generally felt that the didn't agree with the goal or feel that the resolution achieved the stated goal. I'll just mention that one of the special committees was the Special Committee on Decorum, and one of our members was sort of the subject of that particular committee. He felt that he was totally exonerated by it and did not feel that the moderator powers were too great in that case. So he was one of the no votes. Thank you.
Mr. DeMarco for the Transportation Committee.
Our committee met in joint session, as you heard earlier, on Tuesday evening, then adjourned to our own room for discussion and voting. The vote was 0-10-0 with Districts 6 and 11 absent. The reasons for the negative vote were some members felt there was no problem with the current procedures, some felt the proposed change would reduce the moderator's flexibility, and others felt strongly that the resolution would not achieve the stated objectives of transparency and records of all actions.
Mr. Von Keisling for the Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Madam Moderator Pro Tem. The Appointments Committee met on January 5th on this item. The vote was 6-0-5. The 6 in favor of it were obviously in favor of it on its merits. The abstentions were because of some doubt about operational impacts, and they're concerned of potential limiting of the moderator's powers. So it was 6-0-5.
That concludes our committee reports. Is there discussion on item number 1?
Madam Chairman, could I make a motion? I'd move a 3-minute limit on any debate.
Mr. Von Keisling has made a motion for a 3-minute limit on debate. And that motion has been made and seconded. It is a procedural matter, so we will do it by voice vote. All those who are in favor of limiting debate to 3 minutes, and I assume that's 3 minutes pro and con, Mr. Von Keisling?
I would assume so, Madam. Being fair as usual.
All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. There is a 3-minute limit. Mr. Byrne has been very nice and left me his watch, which has a very big dial. All right, now. Those who wish. Mr. Boutel.
Just to clarify, did we just vote to limit total debate to 3 minutes? If so, I applaud that. Or did we limit to 3 minutes per speaker per item?
I think it's 3 minutes per item.
I was thinking limited 3 minutes for the whole debate. I voted on. I think the body meant 3 minutes per speaker.
That is what the chair assumed. 3 minutes per speaker per item, and it only applies to item 1, and it applies to everyone. Everyone speaking on item 1. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on item 1? All right. Mr. Curtis, over in the corner.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and I will be very brief. As was stated in the committee reports, most of the people who heard my commentary was the resolution is very simple. I went to research a committee that was appointed by the moderator through the minutes and tried to find out when it was created and who was appointed at the time, and I couldn't. So last spring when I was doing this, actually last fall, I had written the resolution and had not passed the petition until last month. Basically, any business that the RTM does as committees should be transparent. Anyone on this body should be able to go back and find when these committees were created by, whether it's done by the RTM or done by the moderator. In the sense that you use a resolution requires that it's on the call and recorded in the minutes, so it's going to be there. It's going to be recorded. The only other comment I would have to say is that if we're to run the RTM's business transparently. We have to be able to go back and do this kind of research and look for this information. There's no reason to not do it. This may not be the proper way to do it. It may not be the best method to do it. It is a method to do it, and it will force the creation of these committees to be put into the minutes. That is the only goal of this. There's no changes in anything else. Other RTMs, such as Westport, do this. Their moderators' committees are voted on by their body. I'll bet it's not 230 members. They do that. So, as I said, my focus is to get these things recorded in the minutes and to keep our business transparent. Thank you.
Mr. Burns?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Make no mistake about it. This resolution is to eliminate moderator special committees, not to put anything in the minutes. I don't think any one of us would have any problem if that was the goal, to say, add some sentence to the rules, and when such a special committee is appointed, it shall be duly noted in the next RTM meeting minutes. That would put things in the minutes. That is not what this is. We all know what this is, and you have heard, I thank Dr. Karen Fasiliotis for using the 3 minutes that, the unlimited time that she had to repeat my arguments. And so I will simply say this. We know what this is. You have heard the reasons why I believe this is not a good idea. I hope you agree with me. Vote this down. And by the way, by voting it down, send a message that the next time that someone wants to propose a rule change that is significant, that you demand a full justification. What is the reason for it? What is the history that brought this proposal to you? Because my time and your time is not their time. I think our time is the public's time, the town residents' time. We have important business to do. And all of our committees should not have been jammed into meeting rooms on Monday and Tuesday night when we have important budget work to do. We passed a resolution on the budget, and that is what we should be doing. Not someone saying, here's something that's incomplete. You fix it. Demand that when they bring something to us, that it is in proper order, and this is not. So vote this down.
We have had a motion to cut off debate. Mr. Butel? Yes, you are.
Madam Moderator, I had not intended to speak tonight until the previous speaker, who obviously is taking something personally. I take at face value what another RTM member says to me, and when Mr. Curtis gave us his explanation that he gave to the committee as well, I take that at face value. I don't read into motives, which we are not supposed to be doing from this podium. I also take offense when a committee report says something that 20 registered voters signed is a waste of our time. We are a representative town meeting. If 20 voters feel it's significant enough for us to spend time on, we spend time on it. Besides the power to create special committees, the moderator additionally has the sole authority to assign items. And this did not need to be assigned to all committees. So to suggest that we wasted time this week taking up this item, I find objectionable.
Any other delegates who wish to speak? We have moved the previous question, that is to cut off debate. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. All right, we will proceed to vote then. Will the district chairs please mark their voting cards, item number 1, and proceed to poll your district. I have the vote before we proceed on the consent items. It was 162 to 2. No abstentions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. And Ms. Caldwell will remain to announce the results of the vote that is currently underway. Item 5 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on item 5? David Tice, our member of the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Resolved that the following named person be renominated to the board by the Board of Selectmen to be a member of the Board of Ethics for a term expiring March 31st, 2014, Robert V. Siska.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Delman with the report of the Town Services Committee.
Good evening again. Mr. Siska was unable to meet with us on Tuesday. We voted 11-0-0 to postpone this item until the March 2011 meeting. District 8 was absent, and at the appropriate time, I'll make such a motion.
Mr. Von Keyserling with the report of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Appointments Committee met to interview Robert Siska on the 5th of January. We voted 12-0-0 in favor of his reappointment. We found him to be a very active and interested member of the Board of Ethics and was furthering the purposes that we hope would be achieved.
Mr. Delman.
I understand it will be postponed, so I guess we'll give the report again.
On behalf of the Town Services Committee, we make a motion to postpone this till March.
That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. I will call for a voice vote. This is if you are in favor of putting off item 5 until our March meeting, you should vote yes. If you want to continue considering it tonight, you should vote no. All those in favor of the Town Services motion to postpone item 5 to our March meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion to postpone is carried. Item 11 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that? Kip Bergweger, Vice Chair of the Legislative and Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Legislative and Rules Committee moves that the rules of the representative town meeting be amended by adding Section 3, Roman numeral 1.6. The resolution is as it appears in the call.
Thank you. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this? Dr. Fosliotis with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
I'm back. The Health and Human Services Committee met in a joint session with the Parks and Recreation Committee and Transportation Committee on January 11th, 2011 in the Cone Meeting Room. The meeting was called to order by Vince DeMarco, District 9 and Chair of the Transportation Committee at 7:30 p.m. This was the first item we discussed that night. Kip Bergweger, I'm sorry, I can never pronounce your name, Kip, Vice Chair of the Legislative and Rules Committee, provided the members with the intent and background of the rule change. He reminded RTM members that an amendment to the RTM rules was recommended by the Special Committee on Rules in their 2009 report to the RTM. The Special Committee reasoned that amendments to the Charter, statutes, and regulations, as well as the proposal of new laws and regulations, can be complicated and affect other laws and regulations and the way the town runs. It makes sense to take a careful look at these proposed changes and have a healthy debate, both in committee and on the floor of the RTM. The RTM chose to postpone the recommendations of the special committee indefinitely. However, the Legislative and Rules Committee felt that the rule change would be useful and chose to bring it back with some modifications. The chief modifications was that in some instances, there were amendments proposed by speakers on the floor, and it was difficult to follow these amendments as you sat there in your chairs. Sometimes you can't get all the changes, or it might be a change that would cause conflict with another section in the proposed law or regulation. The resolution proposed by the Legislative and Rules Committee would take that into account and require a second reading. KIPP also stated that the proposed rule does not contemplate a third reading if there are revisions to the original draft. However, various members of the RTM questioned whether that were really true. For example, if additional amendments are offered on the floor, the rules would require that they be sent back, and potentially the item could be sent back indefinitely. Additionally, it may be necessary to refer the item back to 2 or 3 committees, and there's nothing in the rule to reconcile that scenario. It was noted that the Finance Committee amended the call version, and I'm sure they will report on that, and it was also noted that the Education Committee believed that the rule change was a good idea. Their thought was that the first reading is actually a referral, not a postponement, and they added a sunset provision. KIPP agreed that the way to implement a second reading rule is complicated and stated that the Legislative and Rules Committee welcomed suggestions for revision. He anticipated that the item will be referred back to the Legislative and Rules Committee for revisions. We then went back to our meeting room in the Evaristo conference room on the 3rd floor. It being late and the weather conditions eroding, there was a snow emergency that had been called by our first selectman. There was little discussion on this item, particularly since the proponent indicated that it would likely be referred back to Legislative and Rules for amendment. The committee vote on the Legislative and Rules proposed rule change was 1-8-0. The dissenting votes felt that more precise wording is needed. One member stated that the resolution as written was so incomprehensible that they could not support it as written. Members noted that the resolution as written does not make it clear how this procedure would work without having at least 3 meeting sessions on the matter. Others felt that we are not the state legislature where they meet often and are able to work through a second reading. The resolution would also require the formation of subcommittees, and there is a question as to whether all the districts have enough members to staff such an endeavor. The question as to what happens when it is considered by more than one committee is also not resolved. The lone vote for the resolution stated that although he does not support the resolution as written, he feels it is important and would like it referred back to Legislative and Rules for further revision. He does not see a problem with the resolution returning to the RTM a month later for a second reading.
Bob Brady with the report of our Education Committee.
Good evening again. The Education Committee met on this again last Monday night. The first part of it was a part of the joint meeting with Legislative and Rules, Land Use, Education, Public Works. Kip Bergweger presented the item, a rule amendment to require a mandatory second reading for resolutions amending the RTM rules, the charter, or an ordinance. The purpose is to avoid the difficulty of addressing amendments on the floor and acting on the final amended resolution at the same meeting. This rule would provide an automatic breathing space except in emergencies or when no changes were proposed. The EdCom discussed this item. The Education Committee believes that the amendment is a good idea, but it does suggest changes to make it clear that if amendments are made on the first reading, the amendments and committee notes would be referred back to the original committees, and that these committees would create a substitute or amended resolution which is brought back to the RTM for a second reading. At the second reading, it would be further amendable, postponable, or referable. The explanos for the second reading would include a discussion of how the recommendations from the first reading were addressed. The objective is that between the first and second readings, the resolution is changed to reflect what was learned at the first reading and whatever transpires between them. The Education Committee recognized that referring the item back to all of the original committees would on its face complicate getting a unified resolution back. Practically, but not part of any formal rule, the Education Committee believes that the committee chairman would caucus, appoint a few interested people to work on the resolution, and review their final product before bringing it back. In our view, the Education Committee's view, legislative and rules would be the coordinator of this work, but not necessarily the sole actor. The Education Committee also noted that in some cases the original resolution so fails that the second read may simply be a motion to postpone indefinitely, so that it may in effect be referred back to the original proponent for repair. The Education Committee does not believe that the Legislative and Rules Committee should have to draft substantial parts of ordinance or other resolutions. It should be a reviewer for and advisor to the RTM, not the original scribbler. In response to KIP's request at the Monday night meeting for recommendations, not just no, the Education Committee proposed 5 specific amendments, which are shown in the, which I've got attached here. These proposed amendments do 3 things. It clarifies that the intent is that the revised resolution come back to the RTM for second read, not just the original resolution with a group of amendments. We want to see what is presumably final copy. Second, that establishes a sunset date of December 31, 2013, and if we don't like what's happening, we can not bother to readopt. And third, correct the reference to conditions which permit final action on the first reading. It's somewhat ambiguous in the original language. The Education Committee adopted the recommended changes 1200, and the resolution is amended 1200. In a note to the Legislative and Rules Committee, the Education Committee claims no pride in authorship in the final wording. At the appropriate time, I'll have the proposed amendments.
Thank you. Before proceeding further, I will turn the chair over to our moderator pro tem, Joan Caldwell.
The vote on item 1 was 44 in favor, 122 opposed, 6 abstentions. The item has failed.
Thank you. Evan Delman, Chair of our Town Services Committee, with a report on item 11.
We again met on Tuesday night. Our discussion centered around a legal clarification. If after the first reading and 1 month's hiatus, an amendment were offered and passed, would it then be a new motion and be required to wait another month? We had no attorneys, so we voted 3-6. The 6 consensus were that it was a good idea but had not yet been fully explained. District 8 was absent, and at the appropriate time, on behalf of the committee, I will ask that question if needed.
Gordon Ennis, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee met and voted on this item as it appears in the call, and the vote was, sounds like I'm opening an envelope at the Golden Globe Award. 0-10-2. So then we got into a long discussion supporting what Kip had said in the joint meeting. We really wanted to be constructive and find a way to sort it out. We focused principally on the concept that the RTM deserves to see a significant change in rules or the town charter or ordinances as are specified here for 2 consecutive readings in a static condition. In other words, no changes. So if we see it on meeting 1 and it's amended, it should come back on meeting 2 and then see it again meeting 3. That gives the RTM a chance to think about it, settle in and get comfortable with it. Unchanged. So in order to achieve that, we think it can be done very simply with a modification to the language as it appears in the call. And I'll tell you what those changes are. In paragraph A, we would eliminate the last 2 sentences, delete them. And then in paragraph B, we would add a sentence that says, if further revisions are offered and approved, the procedure shall be repeated at a subsequent RTM meeting, essentially the procedure of committee reports and reading the resolution again and debating it. Mr. Moderator, I can offer that resolution now or later, or we can hear from legislative and rules and see what they want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. My understanding, Ms. Bergweger, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the intention of the Legislative and Rules Committee to hear these reports of our committees and then offer a motion to refer this back. And so all of the proposed changes could then be communicated to the committee. Is that correct? Correct. Thank you. All right, William Drake, Chair of the Budget Overview Committee.
In the Budget Overview Committee's regular meeting on January 6th, we examined and discussed this item, a resolution that matters revising the charter, enacting or revising an ordinance, or revising the rules of the RTM deserve a second reading. In our view, this simply would allow extra time to consider matters which affect these fundamental and important areas. And as a result, our vote was 6 in favor, none opposed, with districts 7 and 9 abstaining, citing the need of more information, and districts 1, 2, 3, and 12 absent.
Thank you. Robert Kavee, Vice Chair of our Public Works Committee.
The Public Works Committee met following the joint meeting. On this item, District 3 was concerned about the definition of emergency in the resolution and believes the paragraph regarding emergencies might not be necessary. District 1 was not certain what the item accomplishes and believes it may be overkill. District 7 was concerned that one person could theoretically offer a revision to the proposed resolution, even if no one else agreed and maybe not even seconded, and this would force the item to be considered at the next RTM meeting. There are situations, perhaps like the phone books being littering, where one or just several people might have rejected the resolution just for that reason, but it certainly would not have carried the RTM. District 3 felt that the RTM has the tools it needs to properly consider and amend resolutions, and he believes that the rule would further delay and maybe indefinitely delay the RTM process. The vote of the committee was none in favor, 10 opposed, with districts 2 and 4 absent.
Thank you. Peter Burr with the report of our Land Use Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. So the Land Use Committee also met in joint session last Monday night. Our vote on this item was 3 in favor, 9 opposed. We were somewhat persuaded by we had our conservation director, Denise Savageau, with us. She spoke against this item, pointing out that it raises technical delays to obtaining approvals to important new ordinances and regulations, and that we don't need to add a layer to a process that can already send regulations, charter amendments, and ordinances back to committee. So again, our vote was 3 in favor, 9 opposed.
Thank you. Karen Sadekhan, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. We met in joint session on Tuesday night, and you've heard several explanations of the presentation by Kit Bergweger. We went back to our room. The committee's vote was 9-0-0 with districts 1, 2, and 3 absent. The general feeling was that the language describing the process was difficult, but the intent was supported to have a further opportunity to review amendments to specified resolutions with a second reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, we met on January 5th. Again, on this item, we voted 10 in favor, none against, with 1 abstention from District 3, and District 10 was absent. The feeling basically summed up is that this summed up in one sentence, that no such resolution shall be adopted at the meeting in which it is first presented. And that covers the whole thing. It will be simple enough. We weren't I think, is happy with some of the wording on it, but that was the gist of it. So that one sentence basically covers the whole thing, and I hope that the Legislative Committee can do its job. Thank you.
Vince DeMarco with the report of our Transportation Committee.
After the joint session, we took this up, and all members, unanimously agreed that the second reading for resolutions affecting the charter, town ordinances, and RTM rules, specifically as stated, would be beneficial, and did not want to vote the item down. However, knowing that numerous revisions had already been suggested and will likely be proposed, a motion was made not to vote on the item as presented. That was unanimous.
Thank you. Mr. Bergweger.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First, I want to thank all committees for giving this careful reading and giving us comments that will be very helpful. At the joint meeting on Monday, Mary Ferry, who's also on the Legislative and Rules Committee, rose and noted her objection to the language. She noted it was confusing and did not clearly spell out how to handle amendments proposed at the first reading. We then, the committee then adjourned to its own meeting and acknowledged the correctness of Mary Ferry's concerns and voted to offer an amendment to refer the item back to Legislative and Rules. The vote on that was unanimous, and I'm prepared to do that at any time, Mr. Moderator.
Okay.
On behalf of the Legislative and Rules Committee, I move that this item be referred back to it for further consideration.
That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. Discussion on the Legislative and Rules Committee motion to refer item 11 back to the Legislative and Rules Committee. All right. Being a procedural matter, I will call for a voice vote. If you are in favor of referring this to Legislative and Rules, you should vote in favor. If you want to continue considering this tonight, you should vote no. All of those in favor of the Legislative and Rules Committee motion to refer item 11 back to the Legislative and Rules Committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting and absent objection, this meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming out on a wintry night. I hope you will all proceed home carefully, with caution. Have a safe trip home.